In the small town of Healing Springs, nestled in upstate New York and known for its therapeutic hot springs, lived Eleanor Prescott, an elegant 65-year-old lady. A retired biology teacher, she was respected by everyone in the community for her wisdom and dedication to studying American medicinal plants. Her impeccably arranged gray hair in a traditional bun contrasted with her youthful spirit and restless mind. On that sunny Saturday morning, the Renewal Thermal Spa was busier than ever. It was the day of Eleanor's monthly lecture on natural treatments, but today would be different. After months of researching and testing formulations, she would finally share her discoveries on a topic that few women dared to discuss openly: intimate female health after 60. Today we're going to talk about a subject that many of us hide, even from ourselves, Eleanor began, adjusting the microphone as she observed the room full of women of various ages. Did you know that more than 70% of women our age suffer from intimate discomfort, but rarely seek help? The murmur in the room confirmed what she already knew. Her best friend and spa partner, Judy Oliver, a 63-year-old physiotherapist specializing in women's health, smiled discreetly from the back of the room. She, more than anyone, knew how much this lecture meant to Eleanor. For years, I believed that discomfort, dryness, and loss of elasticity were simply the price to pay for the years lived, Eleanor continued, until I decided to use my knowledge in biology and phytotherapy to seek solutions. In the middle of the audience, Thelma Morrison, a 67-year-old widow who had recently moved to town, listened attentively to every word. After 3 years of social isolation, followed by her husband's passing, she had lost not only her companion, but also her self-esteem and vitality. When Emily, my granddaughter and now colleague in the profession, told me about this lecture, I thought it would be just another one of those superficial conversations about aging, Thelma commented to the lady seated next to her. I never imagined someone would address this subject so frankly. Emily Prescott, Eleanor's granddaughter and recent pharmacy graduate, watched her grandmother with admiration from the stage. At 26, she represented the bridge between her grandmother's ancestral knowledge and the latest scientific discoveries. Together, they had developed a protocol of natural treatments that combined traditional wisdom with modern scientific evidence. My grandmother always says that our bodies are sacred territories no matter the age, Emily explained, taking the microphone. And that's why we developed the Renewal Protocol, combining natural moisturizers, specific herbal remedies, pelvic exercises, and ancient techniques adapted to the reality of American women. As the presentation progressed, Thelma felt something awakening inside her, a seed of hope that hadn't sprouted for a long time. On the other side of town, in Healing Springs' most prestigious medical office, Dr. Richard Anderson frowned as he read his secretary's notes about the event at the spa. "These women are playing with people's health," he grumbled, tossing the note in the trash. "Herbal medicine and thermal baths, as if that could replace proven hormones and medications." Dr. Richard, a traditional gynecologist of 58 years, was known for his skepticism towards alternative treatments. For him, menopause and female aging were conditions to be treated with aggressive medical interventions, not with teas and baths. What he didn't know was that his own wife, Barbara Anderson, 62, was at that very moment sitting in the last row of the spa auditorium, wearing dark glasses and a hat to avoid being recognized. After years of strictly following her husband's recommendations and still suffering from discomfort, she decided to seek alternatives without his knowledge. "Our approach doesn't exclude traditional medical monitoring," Eleanor clarified, as if she could hear the doctor's thoughts. "In fact, the ideal is to combine multiple approaches for comprehensive care." At the end of the lecture, as women lined up to talk to Eleanor and Emily, Judy noticed Barbara trying to leave discreetly. "Mrs. Anderson?" Judy called softly, approaching. "Don't worry, your presence here will remain confidential, but I'd like to invite you to our support group on Wednesdays." Barbara hesitated for a moment, looking nervously around. "My husband would never understand," she murmured. "He believes his hormones are the only solution." I understand perfectly, Judy smiled. That's precisely why we started this work, to offer options and give women back the power over their own bodies. At that moment, without anyone noticing, Emily observed the interaction between Judy and the mysterious lady in the hat. Something in that scene sparked her curiosity. There was a story there, a story she needed to uncover. Meanwhile, Thelma patiently waited her turn in line, holding a small notebook where she had written down every detail of the presentation. For the first time in years, she felt there was a possibility of regaining not only her intimate health, but also her joy of living. What none of them imagined was that this simple lecture would be just the beginning of a journey that would profoundly transform their lives, challenge the traditional structures of the small town, and reveal long-kept secrets about the true origins of the Renewal Protocol. 3 weeks had passed since the inaugural lecture of the Renewal Protocol, and Eleanor and Judy's small thermal spa had become the center of attention in Healing Springs. Thursday sessions, once empty, now had waiting lists, with women coming even from neighboring towns. In the improvised laboratory at the back of the spa, Emily worked tirelessly, perfecting the herbal formulas developed by her grandmother. Herbs like witch hazel, yarrow, calendula, and chamomile were carefully combined in specific proportions to create the oils and creams used in treatments. "Grandma, I think we've managed to improve the moisturizing cream formula," Emily exclaimed excitedly as Eleanor entered the laboratory. "I added pomegranate extract and jojoba oil. The antioxidant properties are impressive." Eleanor smiled, proud of her granddaughter, but her eyes revealed concern. "That's wonderful, dear. But we need to talk about something important," she said, closing the laboratory door. "I received a notification from the state medical board. It seems someone has reported us for illegal practice of medicine." Emily dropped the vial she was holding, spilling an aromatic liquid across the tiled floor. "What? But we've always made it clear that our work is complementary. We never promise to cure anything or replace medical treatments." "Yes, and we have your pharmacy degree and Judy's physiotherapy certificates. Everything within the law," Eleanor replied, helping her granddaughter clean up the mess. "I'm almost certain it was Dr. Richard's doing. He's been losing patients to our natural methods." On the other side of town, Thelma was getting ready for her first individual consultation at the spa. After participating in 2 group sessions, she had finally gathered the courage for a personalized appointment. In front of the mirror, she noticed something different in her face, a vivaciousness she hadn't seen in a long time. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello? Mrs. Morrison, this is Barbara Anderson. We met briefly at the spa, in the Wednesday group." Thelma immediately remembered the elegant and reserved woman who rarely spoke during the meetings. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson. How can I help you?" "I need a favor. Tonight there's a charity dinner at the Thermal Club, and Dr. Richard will be at a conference in New York City. I was wondering if you would accompany me. I don't have the courage to go alone, and I really need to talk to Mrs. Prescott in a neutral environment." Barbara's voice trembled slightly, piquing Thelma's curiosity. "It would be my pleasure, Mrs. Anderson. Shall we meet at 7 p.m.? Meanwhile, at Dr. Richard's office, Judy nervously waited in the waiting room. Dressed formally, and with a folder of documents on her lap, she breathed deeply, trying to control her anxiety. "Mrs. Judy Oliver?" called the secretary. "The doctor will see you now." Dr. Richard rose only partially when Judy entered, a calculated gesture of little respect. "To what do I owe the visit from the famous physiotherapist of alternative therapies?" he asked with an ironic smile. "I came to propose a partnership, Dr. Anderson," Judy replied, sitting down and opening her folder. "I believe we can work together for the benefit of our patients." The doctor let out a short laugh. "Partnership? Between evidence-based medicine and your magic herbs?" "Exactly. And I brought the evidence you value so much." Judy placed a stack of scientific articles on the desk. "Studies published in international journals about the benefits of American herbal remedies in women's health. Some of them conducted by Harvard Medical School itself. Richard's smile disappeared as he leafed through the documents. This doesn't prove that your methods work. We're not claiming they replace traditional medicine, doctor. We're proposing complementary work. You take care of the hormonal part, and we help improve quality of life with natural methods. The patients only stand to gain. Richard adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. I'll analyze your proposal, but don't create expectations. That night, the elegant hall of the Thermal Club sparkled with crystal chandeliers and orchid arrangements. The charity dinner brought together the town's elite to raise funds for the municipal hospital. Thelma and Barbara arrived discreetly, choosing a table off to the side. It wasn't long before Eleanor, accompanied by Emily, joined them. What a pleasant surprise to find you here, Eleanor smiled, sitting next to Barbara. Is everything all right? Barbara looked around, making sure no one was watching them. Actually, I need to tell you something important, something that might change everything you think about the renewal protocol. The three women looked at her in surprise. 30 years ago, when I worked as a researcher at Columbia University, I had access to rare documents from the Lewis and Clark expedition to the American West in the early 19th century. Among the documents, I found diaries of a Native American midwife named Running Deer, who had taught the explorers medicinal techniques using plants from the Appalachian forests, specifically for women's intimate health. Eleanor paled, holding her water glass firmly. Barbara, how did you? The original documents disappeared from the archive, and I always suspected someone had taken them. When I heard about your renewal protocol, I immediately recognized the techniques described by Running Deer. Barbara continued. It's not a coincidence, is it? Eleanor took a deep breath before answering. My grandmother was Running Deer, from the Cherokee people. The documents didn't disappear. They were returned to whom they rightfully belonged. The knowledge was hers, not the explorers who recorded it. A heavy silence fell over the table. Emily looked at her grandmother in astonishment. This was a part of family history that had never been shared. I'm not here to accuse anyone, Barbara quickly clarified. I'm here because I believe this knowledge needs to be preserved and recognized. And because I fear my husband is determined to discredit you at any cost. Why? Asked Thelma, confused. Because he's about to launch a line of synthetic hormonal products for women over 60, and your natural method threatens his plans, Barbara revealed, with tears in her eyes. And because he knows I contributed to your research without his knowledge. He found my diaries. At that moment, Judy hurriedly entered the hall, heading to their table with an alarmed expression. Eleanor, we need to go immediately. The spa laboratory. There's been a break-in. They took all our formulas and notes. Emily jumped to her feet. And the samples I prepared? The research documentation? Everything, including your great-grandmother's recipe book. Eleanor remained, surprisingly calm. It doesn't matter. They can take the papers, but the true knowledge is here, she said, touching her head. And here, she added, placing her hand over her heart. It's time to share the complete story of the renewal protocol. The true story. The next morning after the theft, a small crowd gathered in front of the Renewal Thermal Spa. Women of all ages, many of them loyal clients of Eleanor and Judy, brought plants, herbs, and even family recipes as a show of solidarity. In the center of the inner garden, transformed into an improvised open-air auditorium, Eleanor remained serene, observing the movement with a discreet smile. Beside her, Emily organized the herb donations, cataloging each species with scientific precision. I never imagined we'd have so much support, commented the young pharmacist, visibly moved. True knowledge cannot be stolen, my dear, Eleanor replied. It lives in people, in traditions, in collective wisdom. That's precisely what our opponents don't understand. Thelma arrived accompanied by 5 more ladies from the support group, all carrying seedlings of medicinal plants in small, decorated pots. "We brought our contributions to rebuild the herb garden," she announced, hugging Eleanor. "And that's not all." Mrs. Margaret, who works at the town hall, managed to schedule a public hearing to discuss the importance of natural therapies as cultural heritage of the town. As they prepared the space for the extraordinary meeting, Judy received a call that left her visibly disturbed. Moving away from the group, she spoke in a low voice for a few minutes before returning with a grave expression. "It was from Dr. Richard's office," she informed in a contained tone. "Barbara was admitted to the hospital last night with a severe allergic reaction. Apparently, he tested one of the new hormonal products he's developing on her." A heavy silence fell over the group. "We need to visit her," Eleanor promptly decided. "Emily, can you reorganize our schedule?" "Of course, Grandma. But what about today's meeting?" "Thelma can lead it. She's more than prepared." Thelma's eyes widened, surprised by the unexpected responsibility. "Me? But I don't have scientific training like you." "You have something much more valuable," Eleanor smiled, holding her hands. "You have lived experience and the ability to communicate with the heart. Sometimes, that's more powerful than any degree." At the municipal hospital, Barbara rested in a private room. Her face, normally elegant and composed, showed signs of hives and swelling. Seeing Eleanor and Judy entering, she tried to sit up but was gently prevented. "Don't worry, it wasn't as serious as it looks," she assured them in a weak voice. "The on-call doctor said I was lucky. If I had taken longer to seek help..." "How did it happen?" Judy asked. "Richard brought samples of the new product he's developing. He said it was completely safe, tested in the laboratory." Barbara paused, swallowing hard. "When I started feeling my throat closing, he panicked. That's when I realized I was the first person to try that formula." Eleanor took a deep breath, controlling her indignation. "I brought something for you," she said, taking a small vial from her bag. "It's a compound of green propolis and comfrey. It will help your immune system recover more quickly." "Thank you." Barbara hesitated, looking at the door. "But I can't accept it here. If Richard finds out..." "I understand." Eleanor put the vial away. "When you're discharged, come see us. We'll be waiting." At that same moment, at the Renewal Spa, Thelma was facing her first big test as temporary spokesperson. The garden was completely packed, with over 100 women waiting for guidance. "I know you all came seeking the renewal protocol," she began, her voice initially trembling but gaining firmness with each word. "But today, I want to propose something different. Let's create a new protocol together, gathering not just Mrs. Prescott's knowledge, but also the traditions that each of us inherited from our mothers and grandmothers." An excited murmur ran through the audience. "Instead of being passive consumers of a treatment, let's become active guardians of this knowledge," Thelma continued. "Each of us has something valuable to contribute." While Thelma conducted the meeting with surprising poise, Emily had quietly headed to the local police station. With determined steps, she entered the office of Sheriff Robert Freeman, an upright man she had known since childhood. "I have enough evidence to request a search warrant," she stated, placing a folder with documents on the desk. "Security camera. Records clearly show Dr. Richard's car parked in front of the spa on the night of the theft. Additionally, we found this in the garden." Emily showed a fine handkerchief with the initials R.A. embroidered. "That's not enough evidence, Emily. You know that. Maybe not in isolation, but with this..." She slid a flash drive across the counter. "These are recordings from the last 3 meetings of the hospital's ethics committee. Dr. Richard openly declared his intention to eliminate the competition from the healers, as he called us. And there's more. Unofficial records of product. Tests without FDA approval. The sheriff examined the material with a grave expression. This is serious, Emily. Very serious. We don't want to harm anyone, Sheriff. We just want our research back and the right to continue our work. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Richard hurriedly entered Barbara's room, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a contrite expression. "How are you feeling, dear?" he asked, kissing her on the forehead. "Better, thank you," she replied dryly. "I'm sorry for what happened. It was a terrible mistake. I should never have tested an unapproved product on me," Barbara completed, looking at him directly. "Or stolen research from the renewal spa?" Richard paled. "What are you talking about?" "Don't insult my intelligence, Richard. I worked in scientific research for decades. I recognize an adapted formula when I see one. What you gave me yesterday was clearly derived from Irene's herbal remedies, but with added synthetic components." The doctor sat heavily in the chair next to the bed, running his hands over his face. "You don't understand, Barbara. Those women are playing with something they don't comprehend. Their knowledge is primitive, based on superstitions." "Is that so?" Barbara questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Then why steal something primitive? Why not develop your own line of products from scratch?" Before Richard could answer, his cell phone rang. The doctor's expression transformed into pure shock as he listened to the message. "I need to go," he announced, rising abruptly. "The police are at my office with a search warrant." When Richard left, Barbara picked up her own phone and dialed a number. "Caroline? It's Barbara. I need you to come to the hospital immediately. I know exactly where your grandmother's documents are." The following afternoon, the municipal auditorium was packed for the first Women's Holistic Health Conference in Crystal Springs. On stage, a panel composed of Irene, Julia, Caroline, Teresa, and to many people's surprise, Barbara, who had been discharged that morning. "I want to thank everyone for being here," Irene began. "What started as a simple lecture on women's intimate health has transformed into a movement to value traditional knowledge and women's autonomy over their bodies." Caroline stood up next, displaying images of Native American plants on the screen. "Thanks to Dr. Barbara Anderson's courage, we recovered not only our research, but also historical documents that prove the efficacy of techniques developed by my great-grandmother, Janet, and preserved for generations of Native American women." Barbara took the microphone, visibly emotional. "As a researcher and as a woman, I couldn't allow this ancestral knowledge to be inappropriately appropriated and transformed into commercial products that ignore its true essence. That's why I made the decision to officially join the Renewal Spa team as scientific research director." A murmur of approval ran through the auditorium. "And I have more news," Barbara continued. "My husband, Dr. Richard, after reflecting on his actions and facing legal consequences, has decided to collaborate with our initiative. As part of a judicial agreement, he will make his laboratory facilities available to scientifically validate natural treatments, finally uniting the two worlds." Julia stepped forward. "And to ensure that this knowledge is never lost or privatized, we are creating the Janet Foundation, a nonprofit institution dedicated to preserving, documenting, and sharing traditional female care techniques." Teresa, who was observing everything with tears in her eyes, was called to the stage. "Ms. Teresa will be our special ambassador," Irene announced, representing all women who, after 60, refuse to accept discomfort as inevitable and choose to live fully. Under warm applause, Teresa approached the microphone. "When I came to Ms. Irene's first lecture, I was looking for solutions to physical problems. What I found was much more: a community, a purpose, and the understanding that we, mature women, are not a problem to be solved, but guardians of knowledge that can transform lives." A month later, the Renewal Thermal Spa had expanded to a new space, 3 times larger than the original. The medicinal herb garden, now open to public visitation, had become a tourist attraction in the city. And most impressively, women from all over the United States traveled to Crystal Springs to learn and share knowledge about women's health. In the center of the garden, under a century-old oak tree, Irene gathered a group of apprentices daily, while Caroline meticulously documented each technique and formula. True power is not in keeping knowledge to yourself, Irene taught, observing the women around her. It's in sharing it freely, allowing it to grow and adapt with each new guardian. And so, what began as a simple lecture on a delicate topic transformed into a silent revolution, giving women back not only physical comfort, but the ancestral wisdom that had always rightfully belonged to them. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Ms. Irene, Caroline, Teresa, and Barbara has touched your hearts and awakened important reflections on women's intimate health. To continue this essential conversation and discover more inspiring stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist on female self-knowledge and well-being. Find it here on the left side of the screen. If this narrative resonated with you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with other women who deserve to know the power of ancestral female wisdom. Remember to comment below. I take care of myself and celebrate my health. To be part of this community that chooses to live fully in all phases of life. New stories of female empowerment are shared daily here on our channel,